A feast, a betrayal, a royal bloodbath, long before George R. R. Martin's Red Wedding shocked audiences in the Game of Thrones. A real-life event of treachery and murder unfolded in the heart of Scotland. Known as the Black Dinner, this was the real-life influence for that famous Red Wedding. However, to really understand the Black Dinner, we have to go back a little bit further in time to set the stage for what caused the Black Dinner, and that is the assassination of King James I of Scotland. King James I of Scotland was a highly educated poet king with grand ambitions. He ruled during a time of strife and rebellion. His reign was marked by his efforts to consolidate power and curb the influence of powerful noble families, which, just like happens in Game of Thrones, that makes you many enemies. So let's take a brief look at his life and reign. He was the youngest of 3 sons, born to King Robert and Annabella Drummond of Scotland. His eldest brother, David, Duke of Rothesay, also died under suspicious circumstances while detained by his uncle, Robert, Duke of Albany. The middle brother, also called Robert, also died young from illness. So therefore, concerns for young James' safety deepened in the winter of 1405 to 1406, prompting King Robert's plans to send him away for his own protection. So therefore, Robert made arrangements with the King of France to ward his son with them, and in 1406, he was sent under royal escort to cross the Channel into France. However, he ended up having to take refuge in the Basrock Castle after his royal escort was attacked by supporters of Archibald, the 4th Earl of Douglas. Now, remember that name, Douglas. He remained there under self-imposed guard until mid-March, when he finally did board that vessel bound for France. However, on March 22nd, an English vessel captured the ship and delivered him to King Henry IV of England. Meanwhile, his ailing father, Robert III, died, and now the 11-year-old James was now the uncrowned King of Scotland and remained in captivity under the King of England, while Scotland was ruled by a contingent of nobles. However, James was educated well during his imprisonment in England. He was often kept in the Tower of London and Windsor Castle, among other English castles. He was generally well treated and developed a respect for the English forms of governance. He even joined the later crowned Henry V, yes, that Henry V, in his military campaigns in France. So yes, he was there for all of Henry V's glorious campaigns in France. And as you can imagine, because there were Scottish troops fighting with France against England, that did not endure the young James to his Scottish countrymen. He would also marry Joan Beaufort, daughter of the English Earl of Somerset, in February of 1424. And then he was released by Henry V in April of that same year to return to Scotland and assume the crown. Well Englishnized. I mean, he was a supporter of Henry V and all things English. So his return to Scottish affairs was not altogether popular. And of course, many of the noble families decided to kind of start a coup against him. But James, undeterred, started to raise taxes on these Scottish families, and also decided to impose the literature, music, and law of England to help bring Scotland together and to make it govern better according to him. He also started to launch preemptive attacks with some of his closer noble families and family against other nobles to secure his position at court. he was very, very close with his kinsmen, the Stuarts, who would later play a huge part in English history as well as Scottish. This led to many executions of many high-ranked Scottish nobles, including the Duke Murdoch and his entire son and all his sons. He also summoned many of the Highland clans to a meeting of Parliament, and he had some of them murdered as well, including imprisoning Alexander, Lord of the Isles, along with his mother, Mariota, the Countess of Rose. This effectively destroyed any hopes of peace he may have had with the Highland clans. Then enter Archibald, 5th Earl of Douglas, the same one that tried to fall upon him when he was a young boy. He had him arrested in 1431, and followed by George, Earl of March, in 1434. Basically, he held them and extorted money from their families to pay their ransom, but then diverted that money into his own new palace at Linlithgow, and also some other schemes to increase the power of the royal family. Sir Robert Graham attempted to have the king arrested at a general council meeting of Parliament, but the attempt failed, causing James and his wife, Joan, to flee to Perth and ensconce themselves at the Blackfriars Monastery, what was meant to be a place of refuge. Instead, it became a trap. Among those plotting against the king was Sir Robert Graham, a former ally turned bitter enemy, his discontented uncle, Walter Stewart, the Earl of Atholney, and, of course, many of the Douglas clan. On the night of February 20th, the conspirators struck. James, alerted by the commotion, attempted to flee, but he found himself cornered. In a desperate bid for survival, he tore up floorboards to hide in a hidden sewer passage, only to discover it had been sealed off earlier by his own orders to prevent his essentially golf balls from getting lost down there. I kid you not. The medieval equivalent of golf. The king did fight valiantly, but he was ultimately overpowered by his attackers. He was brutally murdered, stabbed dozens of times, in a horrifying, bloody scene. The echoes of his screams must have reverberated around the halls of the monastery. His widow, Queen Joan Beaufort, and their young son, James II, who was just an infant at the time, escaped with their lives. But Scotland was left divided, and the powerful Douglases, the most powerful family and clans head, began seizing power to expand themselves as the new royal family of Scotland. They were virtually untouchable until James II himself came of age. He was hidden away under the protection of not only Queen Joan, but Sir William Crichton, who had been a huge supporter of King James I. Through Crichton's political motivations, young James II was eventually crowned King of Scotland, and he decided to deal with the Douglases. Whether or not James II, the young boy, had any knowledge of this, we don't know. There are signs that he may have and signs that he may not have not. So we'll just say, for the sake of this, that he did know, and we'll go with that. So he extended an invitation to the teenage Earls of Douglas to dine at Edinburgh Castle under a guise of reconciliation and bringing Scotland back together. The two young Douglases arrived, unaware of any treachery that may await them. They were warmly welcomed, seated at a grand feast, and entertained by the court. But as the evening progressed, just like in Game of Thrones at the Red Wedding, the atmosphere shifted. Whereas in Game of Thrones, the haunting refrains of the Rains of Castamere echoed through the Tower's hall, citing the power and presence of the Lannisters. Here, servants presented a covered platter to the two young lords, and when the lid is removed, it reveals a bull's head, a black bull's head, severed from the rest of the body, a symbol of death in Scottish lore. As you can imagine, the Douglases were horrified, but realized none too late they had walked into a trap. The two teenage earls were dragged from the banquet without trial. They were accused of treason and executed by beheading in the castle courtyard. The deaths sent shockwaves through Scotland and cemented this night as one of the bloodiest betrayals in its history. And this all took place at the royal residence at Edinburgh Castle. This gruesome event became known as the Black Dinner. It is synonymous with treachery. It not only inspired George R.R. Martin's Red Wedding, but it also served as a chilling reminder of the ruthless power struggles of medieval Scotland. And it also did cement James II as the unfettered monarch for the time. So whatever lessons you learn, one lesson is clear. In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again real soon. Gen X.